Do I have a motion from the board to accept Megan Largy as the additional third grade teacher at the Hooksett Memorial School?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Do you have a motion from the board regarding the boys soccer coach at Collie Middle School? To ratify, I'm sorry. Do I have a motion from the board to ratify the appointment of Daniel Van Avery as the boys soccer coach at the Collie Middle School?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. The next item on the agenda is policies. We have a number of policies here for their first reading.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I thought we had agreed by vote to reset these policies back to the way they were at the beginning of July.
Yes, the board had voted that.
So I was rather surprised to see them now on the agenda in that same form.
Well, it is the recommendation of the policy committee that we adopt these changes to become compliant with, or to become closer to what the New Hampshire School Boards Association recommends the policies to be, and to help this board and the administration work more effectively.
But that's already been done, and we voted to essentially not adopt them.
Yes, and it was, during that discussion, it was brought up by board members that we should go through the normal first and second readings of these policies.
So the last standing vote on these policies was that we would return them to their, I believe it was July 1st version. Is that not the record?
That is,
So why have they now surfaced again when, and I'll say it here, that was part of an agreement to clear multiple agenda items. Part of it was to leave these policies as they stood. So why are we back here?
these are the recommendations from the policy committee regarding how for this board and the administration to work more effectively. Under policy BHC, there was much confusion from which original we were going back to because there had been a change made at the board level that wasn't clear in the minutes, nor was it clear in the video, and the policy committee feels that in order to be in compliance with fair labor practices and not put our unions in any jeopardy, that all communication should come through the superintendent. That was why that policy came back. Regular board meetings and emergency board meetings was a recommendation of regular, emergency, and special was a recommendation of the board that we look at those because our original emergency policy was called a special board meeting, and special board meetings are actually addressed in the regular board meeting policy. So that's why those two policies are there. It's also for efficiency, when two board members call a meeting, you don't have a meeting unless you have a quorum. So it's easier if you have a quorum. When you call the meeting, you know you have a meeting. It creates a great deal of email communication and creates an administrative nightmare in trying to find when board meeting members can have a meeting. That was the reason that they recommended that.
Madam Chair, I understand and appreciate what these recommendations are, but if we're to move ahead, we've been through this, and we made a decision that I thought was moving us ahead. And I will say, other than the emergency meeting, because I don't remember that being part of it, but agenda preparation, regular board meeting, employee communication, email, all of those things were discussed here, and this board voted to reset those to July, and we moved on. And now they're back.
Yes, sir.
So,
Why they're back?
so does this mean we should bring back all the agenda items that were taken off in order to get these back? Is that where we're headed back to going over all this stuff yet again? Are you supporting these? You said the policy committee brought these forward, but are you proposing these as chair?
Absolutely, I am in support of these.
So your word, when we discussed resetting this board and starting over, what do you say about that now? Because this was all part of it. So what do you have to say?
No comment at this time. I'm bringing the policies to the board for first reading.
We sat here and agreed to change these back. And now, just matter-of-factly, here they come.
This is so that we're in line with the New Hampshire School Board policy, recommended policies, and that we are working efficiently and effectively.
You didn't say those things when you were one of the people that voted to reset these back to July.
Well, that was my intent.
Madam Chair, I have a hard time now when your word is changed with no reason. You're sitting here telling me whatever. So, policy committee has now just recommended these again. So let's have our first reading and move forward, I guess. But I will tell you right now, it's awful hard for me to accept your word when we're sitting here at this table.
Does anyone else have any questions regarding the first reading of the policies?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On the regular school board meetings, this is HSD file BEA. What is the reason for striking out at least 40%?
Because it needs to be a majority, that means 3 board members would need to be available. What happens, or has happened in the past, is 2 board members have said they can make a meeting, and then it takes 3 board members can't make it, so there's not a quorum, so then there's another date, and it becomes rather cumbersome on the administration when a meeting is called, if you don't already have a quorum, and this would avoid that administrative function.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Wiscars is speaking
I'm sorry.
as a follow-up.
So I'm not that familiar with this stuff, so I'm trying to learn it.
Absolutely.
But it seems like the board members before us who put this together, the idea here was that a minority portion of the board could request a meeting, because that's all it's talking about here. And then it follows the next line, it says, a majority of the board shall constitute a quorum. So I really don't understand the removal of the 40%. All that does is it removes the ability of a minority of a board to request a meeting. It really doesn't talk about who's going to attend the meeting. That's covered in that next line. So I think the folks that were before us that put this together, I think they did it for a reason. And I think by us voting to strike out that 40%, what we're really doing is taking away the ability for the minority to call a meeting or to request a meeting. That's all we're doing. So I don't support it. That's my understanding of it.
It actually puts us in compliance with the New Hampshire School Board Association with the recommended wording. Yes, Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, so I'm of the feeling that I'm in line with what David's talking about. You talked in the past about how, I'm sorry, time is of the essence right now and we need to deal with things. And I'm not saying these items are unimportant, but my understanding at that meeting was the fact that there was concession on either side, and these policies are part of that concession, even though they're the policy committee. So, I mean, we'll do the first and second reading after we do where they're introduced, but I'm in line with David. I agreed to reset these policies to where they were at before those meetings, and I'm going to stick with that.
call it, go.
But I'm just asking you for clarification on first and second readings.
Well, you have many options as a board. It would go to a second reading if the board approves it for a first reading. If the board were not to approve it for the first reading, it wouldn't show up again. So, that's so you don't have the discussion twice. The majority of the board feels as though those policies should not be adopted. They would not be approved for a first reading, and then they're dead. They would not show up again at the next meeting.
Madam
No,
Chair?
I'm actually going to speak first. I had my hand up. At our last meeting, at the meeting that we turned back the clock on policies, the word bury the hatchet was used. Well, it was in the paper. And not only do we have policies, and there have been times that I, being a very new chair, have made mistakes, but repeatedly the public has come here and asked this board to do board business at board meetings. And when we turned back the clock and tried to clear the slate, I was very hopeful, cautious, but I do not feel that that is what happened. I feel that evening that at the hope of it looking better, board members agreed to revert policies that make us an inefficient board. It is very inefficient for us as a board to be setting an agenda up until the day before the staff member who creates the agenda does the agenda. Sometimes she doesn't have the information she needs as she's pulling the agenda together, which was the reason the agenda preparation and dissemination policy I originally brought forward was to make the board more efficient. We often hear how much money we spend for the SAU staff, and we need to make them as efficient as we can. Every other board in this SAU functions in compliance with the New Hampshire School Board Association. They choose their agenda, what is going to be covered on their next meeting at the previous meeting, and they only meet monthly. Regular board meetings, point in case when we have called special meetings, we have spent days in email trying to come up with when a quorum of the board can meet, and if you knew there was a quorum when you had a meeting, you had a meeting. When you called a special meeting, you know you had enough people at the meeting. I think that these policies make this board and the administration in preparing us to meet much more efficient and effective. It avoids cases where an email can be sent, and sometimes we can have very large quantities. They're much lower now, but we were getting, in a 2-week period of time, upwards of 450 emails. That's a lot of emails. And then when you come to a meeting and you may have forgotten something or missed something, we all have very busy lives. You are not said, gee, you forgot this, could be added to agenda. It becomes a opportunity to point fingers and say you were wrong. I think if you prepare your agenda at the meeting before, unless an emergency comes up, you are much more efficient as a board, and that's why I made these recommendations back to the policy committee. Yes, Mr. Pearl.
Madam Chair, part of the attempt for two of us to have a meeting was that the agenda had been pushed back with the items that we wanted to talk about for 2 months. Meetings were adjourned right before our agenda items came up. So there was an attempt to call a meeting, I would say 4 or 5 times, and miraculously no one else was available. When you say that, we were going to reset things and you don't feel that that's happened, I would ask you to please say what it is. Because at the last meeting last week, we went over multiple contract plan, failed, but we discussed it. We have not tried to add any erroneous, as you would think, agenda items. And I didn't point the finger at you when I asked you why my agenda item wasn't included. What concerned me was when you said you just decided to leave it off, and then what concerned me more is when you said that you decided this board does not need additional legal counsel. That's why it's important that these things are on the agenda, so that the board discusses it. I make a motion that we approve.
Actually, Dr. Littlefield asked to speak.
I haven't given up the floor. I make a motion that we approve for second reading the following policies: BHC, BEA, BBB, BEDB, BHE, and DN. If I get a second, I'll speak to my motion. All right, slow down, Leanne.
First, second. I'll get them right
Yes.
here. Let me just read them off, you have to check them off. All these,
Yes, all of them.
BHC, BA, BB, all of them.
Yep.
Motion, that you approve for second reading, is that?
Yes, I'm looking for a second.
Could you read the motion again, please?
David Pearl, motion to approve all these policies for second reading.
Yes.
Whole list, right?
I'll
And
second.
second by Mr. Stars, is that okay? Two seconds?
Sure.
Speak to my motion.
Dr. Littlefield has one.
I was just going to suggest that, since there hasn't been a first reading, the motion says to accept for a second reading, it may be more properly reworded to waive the first reading and act on it as a second reading.
Excuse me, I thought when we were seeing them here in the packet, it was the first reading. We're not at first reading now.
Now, the motion says second reading.
So I was kind of taking off what you said a few minutes ago, that if these were not approved for a second reading, we would have to...
No, I said second, I meant first reading. If they're not approved, and that's what, to tell you the truth, that's what my suggestion to the board would be, to petition these out and vote on them one at a time, and each one lives or dies.
All right. Well, I'd like to amend my motion then to state to approve for first reading. And then if I can get a second, we can vote on the amendment.
I'll second the discussion. You want to speak to your motion?
Well, speaking to the amendment is only to clarify what Dr. Littlefield just said. That's all that I have to say about the amendment.
For clarification, ma'am, this one here though, that was requested by Karen Lassard, I'm just wondering if that's one, that needs to be done separately. Because I don't think that that's really grouped in what, we're really discussing. Is this one that Karen needs to include?
Yes.
I mean, I understand these other ones, and just to be clear on where I stand, I'm in agreement with Mr. Lascars and Mr. Denbo. I know this is frustrating, and I know we've not necessarily all been perfect after that particular meeting, but I do feel that, you know, it's been, for the most part, going in the right direction, and I just don't want to make a step backwards by approving these first readings. So I won't be supporting that. But again, I'm concerned about this one here that's requested by Karen Lassard. That's my only concern.
Can I change my amendment, please, if you'll withdraw your second?
Withdraw my second.
I would make a motion
Draw your
that-
second for what?
The amendment.
for the amendment.
Oh,
We're withdrawing the
without your
amendment.
I was the second.
Oh,
Okay, so you're withdrawing the amendment?
Yes, I'd like to make the amendment as follows: to approve for first reading, and I would like to remove DN, the very last one on the list.
All set.
So point of order, I don't believe the second was removed, so I will remove my second, and I will second his motion.
Vote on the amendment as result.
All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 the amendment, aye.
And
5-0.
Now we're in discussion on the main motion.
Does anyone have anything to discuss in the main motion? Could you read the whole motion, please?
The motion is to approve the first reading of all the policies except DN. Any policies?
No.
Well, our policies, BHC, BEA, BEP, BEP, and
I'm confused. If you're approving the first reading of them, you're moving them to a second reading, is that correct?
I'm not intending on voting yes.
Okay. I was confused, I apologize. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
No.
Mr. Dumbo?
Oh, I said no, sorry.
Motion fails 1-4.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion that we approve for first reading policy DN.
And before we do that, though, it's not in our packet. That's why I just
Right.
realized. Sorry. So should that just be tabled for now?
It can be, we can leave it for a first reading at our next meeting. And it will be in the packet at the next.
Or you can approve it for a first reading, and then the second reading will actually adopt it. So if it's not what you want, you just vote no on the second reading, so that Karen doesn't have to wait.
Do I
And
have-
just for the public's purpose, the policy is for school property disposal procedure.
What is the will of the board?
In my sense, that's something that our auditors want. So we want to have that in place while we're here.
That's what I assumed.
Do I have a motion to approve the first reading of the school property disposal procedure?
Yeah, we already have a motion second.
Okay,
I'm not even a second, I assume say in addition motion or motion to approve the first reading of DN, is that correct?
Yes.
A second.
all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I